Last Resident says, what is the most underrated MCU movie in your opinion? For me, it would be Multiverse of Madness, which is, in my opinion, top 10 MCU. That one is near the bottom of my personal ranking. But the most underrated MCU movie for me, I'm going to have to go with Spider-Man Far From Home. I thoroughly enjoy that one. And again, I know a lot of people who put it in the bottom 5. I dig it, but that's my answer. What would yours be?
Sometimes it's tricky because if you've looked at 5 people's MCU rankings, they're all over the place. And there's a handful that we all agree are in the top 10. There's a handful we all agree are in the bottom 10. And then from there, it gets pretty wild. So the one that I feel like I see the most hyperbolic language about that I don't understand is The Incredible Hulk.
Okay. I
don't have it in the top half of my list, but I also don't have it in my bottom tier either. And I see so I did a tier ranking over the weekend, and I told people, hey, make your own tier list, tag me, and I'll share them. And so I saw one where a guy did his, and he was trying to be clever with his names, and so he had like bottom tier, and then below bottom tier, it said, I needed to make a tier below bottom tier for Incredible Hulk because I'm a massive hater of it. And then below that was the tier Thor 4.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
wow.
But so he's like, I needed a category below bottom tier because I'm a massive hater of Incredible Hulk. And I just don't get that. Like, I don't understand it. And then what was his reason? It's boring. Okay. And boring, I understand. It doesn't have the laugh a minute joke vibe. It's kind of darker. It's reminiscent of the old Bill Bixby TV show. So I get a lot why people wouldn't like it as much, or certainly understand why it's lower on the list. It's lower on my list. But I see all of the hyperbolic language specific to that one that I don't understand. So inherently, that's the one where there's the biggest gap between what makes sense to me and what I see about it.
Another one to me that's underrated is Ant-Man. Like, I think
that's what I was about to say. The Ant-Man,
right on the border of my top 10. One that I say is underrated, but it's almost been said so much that it's become overrated, is Age of Ultron, because I think it's an underrated movie. But then I did a video where a bunch of people were like, it's better than the first Avengers movie. It's better than Endgame. People were saying in my comments. I was like, in my personal preference, that's too much. It has its issues, but I do think I've seen people dismiss that as like just the worst. Like, at the time I worked at a fast food restaurant in high school, people were like, Age of Ultron's the worst MCU movie. I was like, really? I disagree strongly. So those are the ones that I feel like always get tossed around.
I could see that, where it's one of those, the people once again have exaggerated language for how bad it is. I think the individual moments are just as good in that one. Like quips, if you do quip by quip for the Joss Whedon Avengers movies, both of them have great quips. Action sequence for action sequence, both of them have great action sequences. I just think the storytelling gets lost. Like, I call it the most confusing MCU film, where I don't know what other movie in the MCU I would call confusing, but like, if I go a couple years without watching Age of Ultron and I watch it, I'm like, what are they doing again? What are they trying to steal? And Ultron's trying to make a suit, and
the Wanda mine scene is the one that really like feels like something out of the BVS theatrical cut that's just confusing. Like when we saw the Flash show up in that movie, I was like, what? It's like teasing something that might not come in the future. It always was out of place to me.
Yeah, even at the beginning of the movie, you're watching it, and just immediately the Avengers are on a mission with no context. And like movies start with cold opens frequently, but you get to the end of the sequence, and it like cuts to like Wanda is like doing mind stuff on Tony or something, and it with no explanation, and explained like 2 or 3 scenes later. And so there's just some odd stuff that I think is like flawed about it, but you have like, it still has all sorts of great things about it, and people describe it as if it's just this disaster of a film. It's like, it's not that. I think when you have these movies that are these team ups, that there's the potential for it to be way up here. People want it to be way up here, and so if it's only here, you have that feeling of disappointment. Whereas Ant-Man, well, what's Ant-Man going to be? You expect it to be here, and then it's better than that, and so it feels like, oh, you can have kind of that, I don't know, just like expectations for films, like, oh, the Ant-Man films are no good because they're so small scale. that's a weird argument. And then, like, it's the reverse of that. Maybe that's a better way to phrase it. The reverse of that is with Age of Ultron, because it's not top tier, but it's an Avengers film.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that means it must be awful. Like, no,
And
they swung for the fences and they got a double.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate, but it's compared to the first Avengers, which was the first big team up movie we ever got in Hollywood.
Ever from anyone. No one had ever done
Yeah.
that before.
And then Infinity War and Endgame, which is like the 1-2 punch of the MCU, like those are my top dogs. So it's
like they did the
it's
incredible. They pulled it off.
It's the worst of the Avengers movies.
Yeah,
but that doesn't mean it's the worst MCU movie.
Right.
And people, there's a disconnect. I think people just don't realize that.
Yeah, like it's your competition there. You're literally talking about 3 lightnings in a bottles.
Yeah.
It's that you're not supposed to be able to pull it off 3 times out of 4.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird that Endgame is actually excellent. There's no comparative franchise where the 23rd movie in a franchise is really good. Because there's no one else that has done 23 movies in this short a period of time and have it be like a consistent franchise. It's in a category of its own. And the fact that, Avengers 2, like, there's some growing pains in there. They were trying to set up Ragnarok and some other things and allude to Thanos. And it's rocky. It's, maybe it needed to be 20 minutes longer and they didn't want to do that. So, okay, oops. It's a double instead of a home run.
Yeah. And it's
a
still
double
really
is
solid.
still a double.
It's like in 16th or something. It's like literally right in the middle of my MCU ranking, Age of Ultron. So, I like it. I like the movie.